And thank you, Bakersfield Police Chief Lyle Martin, well into his second full year as head of the BPD. We're talking about 30 years of law enforcement experience. Joining us in Studio B this morning to talk about some of the topics making headlines. Chief Martin, thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
First of all, let's begin with the body cameras. That's the big thing that people are talking about as we head into the summer. First of all, can you talk about, are we in the installation process? I mean, has a room been chosen?
No, we've just selected our vendor, so we'll be getting product here in probably around June. I've got a captain and a lieutenant assigned to that, so then we'll get the officers trained on the use of the cameras, and we're also looking at some best practices from other agencies in regards to policies and procedures and those types of things. How
much training does something like this take? Have they told you that?
You know, for a guy like me, probably a week or so, but with these millennials, probably about 5 minutes. You know, they're used to having these electronics, but it's about an 8-hour training, and then we go out and test some things and make sure that they're doing things correctly, and then we're going to go ahead and roll them out.
As far as the technical aspects of these body cams go, there has been some press recently. Sacramento PD got under fire when 2 of their officers actually were able to turn off the microphones during an incident that caused a lot of attention. Is that the kind of thing that you address as well as far as the technical aspect of these?
Absolutely. Actually, this Thursday and Friday, I spent time with the chief of Sacramento, and we talked about some of these issues. That's what I mean, talking about best practices, going out to the folks who've already had them, the experiences they've had, and we're going to try to avoid some of those critical things that sometimes come off as, you know, either you're trying to hide something or things aren't as they seem. So we're looking at all those aspects.
Is it more of the cameras as far as the policing? Has it almost become a viral business in some aspects when it comes to law enforcement?
It has. With the way that we are as a nation or as a world, people want to see the video, they want to see everything. There's a lot of mistrust, not just with police, but just people in common. And people just don't trust each other, so that, you know, if they didn't see it, then they don't believe it.
And even from that aspect, many people have said that 2 people can look at the exact same piece of video in 2 different ways. Moving on to Sacramento lawmakers right now, there's 2 in particular that have talked about changing the use of force when it comes to officers in the state of California. Slippery slope?
I believe so. First of all, the federal law is supposed to trump state law. However, depending upon the lens you're looking through and which legislator you are, you'll choose to believe that when that fits your narrative, and when it doesn't, you'll try to legislate something statewide because you don't like the way that the Supreme Court has decided. But for me, the biggest thing is the words necessary versus reasonable. And I'll give you an example. You have a replica firearm, you're going to do a bank robbery, and you're confronted by an officer, and you point this replica firearm that looks like a real firearm to me. Is it reasonable for me to shoot you? Yes. Was it necessary? You know, by the technical terms, necessary? That would be no. That you had a firearm that could not actually hurt me. That could be dangerous. If you've got officers having to make this decision, are we moving towards a do not fire unless fired upon? And our officers need to go home safely. So depending upon the verbiage, we need to make intellectual decisions when we're changing laws and looking at things, not emotional decisions.
I don't want to make it sound like something like that would determine whether or not someone decides, whether you're a man or woman, to be a police officer, to enter law enforcement. But do you think that that kind of thing could have an impact on your ranks?
I think it could have an impact on recruiting, just like the viral videos and everything else that's going on.
If we could, let's change the ShotSpotter system right now. ShotSpotter's been online. Your impression on how it's worked so far?
We love it. The line officers love it. I mean, if you can get within 5 meters of where a shot was fired, that's incredible. We've had issues or incidents where we didn't get any calls from anyone in the neighborhood, but the officers rolled up and they've actually encountered someone with the firearm and made an arrest based on ShotSpotter technology. So we'll be moving forward. We're looking now to either try to expand the the footprint, and also start to share the notifications with some of the schools and school districts in an effort to make schools safer. So now that administrators can make an informed decision whether they want to put the kids on lockdown, because when these things happen, we don't know if the kids are out at recess or whatever. The officers are responding, and if you can cut down on that time where an officer has to say, put the school on lockdown versus the administrator getting that alert the same time we do, then they have the ability to make decisions a little bit faster, making everyone a little bit safer.
And can you just go over again, talking about how vital it is to be able to get to the scene of where a shot is fired sooner rather than 30 minutes, perhaps later, after someone had heard it, called you, you finally figured out where it was? I mean, talk about that timeline that makes it so vital.
It's critical. For me, like I said, the line staff, they love it for being able to make arrests, but for me, we may save someone's life. Because if no one calls and there's someone lying somewhere who's been the victim of gun violence, we need to get there immediately and start medical aids. Also for evidence gathering and those types of things. If vehicles have been through the area or someone's come through, evidence could get kicked or moved and those types of things, which make solving these crimes a lot harder. So time is of the essence for officer safety, for better investigations, and for the safety of the public.
You talked about accountability, transparency when you took over as Bakersfield Police Chief. There have been a couple of incidents in there, but is it moving in the direction that you wanted it to?
I believe so. I'm excited. We've had incidents where we're pushing things down. I'm empowering our line staff, whether they're sworn officers or professional staff. And I've actually been providing a lot of the training myself to the staff, so they get to hear it from me. And basically what I tell them is, if my behavior or anyone in the organization's behavior is incongruent with the message I've given you, you have the right to check that person on that, regardless of rank. And we're seeing that, and that's the way you got to start internally to hold ourselves accountable before we can go externally and start working on those types of things.
And you pointed out the sergeant that was recently suspected of perhaps being under the influence. 2 of your officers, in fact, turned it in, called a supervisor. A DUI investigator came out to investigate that. Insufficient at that point, but then the DA turns around and files a misdemeanor charge in there. Is there a reason because of the confusion in that, do you know? There's
certain things that we have to make that on-site arrest, and they didn't have those things, so we packaged it up and sent it to the district attorney's office, and ultimately they made the decision to file the case. I mean, from the personnel side, there's not a lot I can talk about, but from the criminal side, I can say this, that those are the types of things we're talking about, a culture of accountability where these 2 officers saw something that's incongruent with our message and our values, and they made the right decision.
Talk about the gang sweeps. That was one of the big things that happened in 2017, had the big gang sweeps. A lot of those cases right now are still in the judicial process of being handled. Without giving too much away, we're looking at another big one in the works coming soon?
We're always working on something. I refuse to sit and just spin my wheels. And the folks that we have working together, whether it's federal, state, and our local partners, we're always looking to make this community safer, and we're thinking outside of the box. I mean, that gang sweep was a little something different than what we'd seen in the past, and I've got great folks that at the line level, they've got great ideas. They're very creative, and they bring some of those ideas to the command team, and I mean, we're just excited to be able to supply the resources for them to get the job done.
Chief Lyle Martin, thanks for coming in and spending some time with us.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be right back.